This week is the second week of the Champions League playoff ties, but because Arsenal played so well in the group stage and avoided those ties, we are sat down with our feet up resting. And that gives me an opportunity to bring you some Arsenal roundup news and chat about two very interesting stories. One, about Arsenal's fine from an independent FA panel, and two, a very interesting story coming out of Spain about Alexander Isak's valuation. Let's get into it. Yes, hello and welcome back to another episode of Arsenal Unfiltered, your 3 times a week dose of Arsenal coverage with me, your host Mark. Today is an episode of the Arsenal Roundup, my weekly news show, where we go through kind of what's going on with Arsenal off the pitch. And we talk about maybe press conferences, injuries, transfers, all of that sort of stuff. Interestingly, today we have a couple of very different stories to talk about. One about a future transfer and Alexander Isak, and a story that's come out of Spain that I want to kind of shed some light on for you guys, because I'm not sure it's quite as true as they're making out, but also to talk about the fine Arsenal have been hit with this week in the wake of the Miles Lewis-Skelly incorrect red card against Wolves. We have somehow been fined for that. There is some detail. I mean, I heard this yesterday and I was annoyed immediately, but I think there's some really key detail which we're going to go through. Before we get into that though, I just want to say I hope you are well, and I hope your family are well wherever you are. And I hope you're enjoying this very short break from the Arsenal. It's been a whirlwind of a season, but it feels like we've had one game in about like 20 days now, until the West Ham game, of course, when we play on Saturday. So yeah, really weird, isn't it? It's a lot less football, and sometimes that can be a relief, and sometimes it can be tough. So I hope wherever you are well. Let's get into it then. Let's talk the Arsenal fine first before we discuss this story coming out of Spain. Very key information, I think. So let's start with the highlights. Arsenal have been fined £65,000 on the back of the misconduct charges from kind of the players essentially surrounding Michael Oliver in the wake of the Miles Lewis-Skelly red card. Now, the decision has already been overturned. We know that, and we've been told actually that decision was wrong. No real apology from PGMOL, but we got our decision overturned, and I think that's probably the best we're going to get. This charge, however, is about 9 players at times, as cited in the report, surrounding Michael Oliver following the decision, and I think it's really key we get this right. Number one, this is not a PGMOL panel, so we don't have to be mad at them for this. They obviously submit a match report, which is included in this this kind of charge and the hearing that's come along with it, but it is not a PGMOL panel. It's obvious it's an FA panel, but it's from kind of independent members, so they're part of the judicial panel. I mean, I don't know how, if you're working for the FA, you're independent from them. But anyway, we won't get into that. Again, very, very important to note on this one that we have admitted the charges. Arsenal have admitted the charges. So I saw it yesterday. I was kind of annoyed by it, frustrated. But actually, Arsenal have admitted the charges. So there was always a fine coming our way. We weren't going to avoid that. And I think that's probably, in hindsight, that's probably a smart move by the club. Stepping away from that and going, we don't need any more attention around Miles Lewis-Skelly's name. We don't need any more kind of analysis of this incident. And whatever fine they were going to slap us with, it will be chump change to a club the size of Arsenal. I promise you that. It obviously turned out to be 65,000. Now that is way above the standard fine. The standard fine for this sort of charge, for a standard charge of misconduct, is £20,000. That's the standard. That's what the FA set out in their guidance. This was basically deemed a very special case. The reason it was deemed a special case is because of the duration of the kind of misconduct and the kind of number of players around Michael Oliver. So again, whilst I was annoyed to see 65,000 and the standard being 20. Very annoyed by that, but actually it's not being judged the same way a £20,000 fine would be judged. Arsenal also, as well as admitting to the charge, they are allowed to kind of submit a case around what's gone on and why, and their kind of mitigations for this. And they absolutely did that, and I think they did a fairly good job. I'm just going to try and find that now in my notes. Here it is. So yeah, they basically said, actually, this was wrong, and Arsenal players immediately felt that it was wrong. At the time, obviously, we didn't have the overturn, but the Arsenal players immediately felt that it was wrong, and they really wanted to understand the VAR decision and understand where the referee was coming from. Arsenal players have also kind of been accused of being aggressive, but actually, Arsenal are citing, they're really not. Gabriel was the main guy in there, and apparently he had his hands behind his back, so that was part of the reason that they said, actually, this doesn't need to be a massive fine. They also cited their kind of improved disciplinary record. So it was the first time we've been cited for misconduct since 2023, I should say, in a match against Leeds. So, yeah, it's an interesting case that Arsenal have put forward, and there's obviously the other case. Sorry, I'm going to say that again. It was Manchester City in 2023. The Leeds fine was in 2022. The Manchester City one was also £65,000. So yeah, 2023. The FA's panel also puts forward their case around there being 9 players. The turning over of the red card doesn't justify the misconduct. And I actually think, they are right. They are probably right. But this is a demystifying piece I'm doing here. So I want to get to the point where we understand why it was so high and why we've received a fine 3 times the normal amount. And like I said, it's not being judged as a normal case. The sanction guidelines for the FA can be anywhere between 20 and 250, £1,000, and there was a recommendation for this fine to be 80,000. So I believe that the FA kind of note to the appeal board or the commission board or the judicial committee, I think they've called it here, that they recommend £80,000 is correct. Which, I think that's an interesting place to be, actually. That would be 4 times the standard amount for a club that haven't done this in basically 2 years. And we've been wronged, basically, the fine of no less than £80,000 is the actual wording. So, I think it's interesting to see the judicial committee come back on that and say, actually, it's a little bit less. We're going to fine you the same amount we fined you in 2023. Ultimately, I'm going to, kind of sum this bit up by saying, look, they got the decision wrong. So for us to be fined for a scenario where Michael Oliver has made a huge, massive mistake, I think is absolutely crazy. But I still do think it was a smart move from the club to actually just say, you know what, we're going to admit the charges. We're going to get this done and dusted. Get this out of the way, and I think there are some clear reasons why it hasn't been the standard 20,000, but it also hasn't been the 80,000 recommended by the FA. So, and they kind of are the 2 cases that were put forward. They're the reasons, and Arsenal had 9 players around the referee, and saying the FA was saying that they were being aggressive, and Arsenal were asserting we weren't being particularly aggressive at all, and the players were emotional and hyped up, and they thought the decision was wrong. So, lots to unpick there. But I think ultimately what we're seeing is a charge that Arsenal just want to get paid and move on from that scenario, and fair play to them. Going to take a quick short break, and when I come back, I'm going to discuss a story coming out of Spain this week about Alexander Isak. Hello and welcome back to this episode of the Arsenal Roundup. A little bit of a demystifying episode here because there's another story that I want to shed some light on. So, coming out of Sport España this week, a couple of days ago, the story broke around Alexander Isak and the potential price a club, Barcelona, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, might have to pay to secure his services in the summer. Now, Sport España are asserting that Isak has a verbal agreement with the Newcastle board that if they miss out on Champions League qualification, which is quite likely at the moment, looking at the table, it's definitely something that could happen to them. They have a tough couple of fixtures coming up in their in their 13 left, and they seem to roll over for everyone but Arsenal, don't they? So that could happen if Newcastle weren't to qualify. Apparently, there is a verbal agreement in place that says Alexander Isak can leave for €100 million, 83 million pounds. So obviously that really changes the complexion for Arsenal fans and caught my eye immediately when I saw it. We have kind of spoken about a £150 million player here, and there are sections of the media that have come out and said Arsenal have to do anything to get this guy. I'm not in that camp, but I can see why you would be in that camp. So there are certainly sections of the media, sections of Arsenal fans that believe 150 million is a good price for Alexander Isak. Not me, but, I can see it. I can see why, I should say. So to see a story come out that says 83 million, I mean, that is an incredible difference. And that would be a verbal agreement, if it was true, that would make all the difference to Arsenal's summer and the kind of progression of this project moving forward. However, we know with Spanish reports that these are sometimes not super true. So I'm going to say that I'm reporting on this kind of to make sure people don't get their hopes up about this story. Chris Waugh, not sure how you say it, but he is a Newcastle journalist for The Athletic, and he came out in a Q&A earlier this week after the story broke and basically said, that is not what I'm hearing. He didn't say outright 100% not true, but yeah, he said basically that it's not really kind of the noise that he's hearing out of the club, and actually Newcastle are in a really strong position over Alexander Isak. What is a fact is how long is left on his contract, and that will be 3 years. 3 years. So it's not like they are desperate to sell him. He's their record signing, I should say. He is a real kind of, bastion of that club right now. They love their centre forwards, and when they get one, that is this level, they're going to try everything to keep him, aren't they? They are going to do absolutely all they can to keep hold of Alexander Isak, even if they don't qualify for the Champions League. And him having 3 years on his contract this summer does mean that Arsenal and any other club that are looking at him are going to have to pay an absurd amount of money for basically the most informed striker in Europe right now. So, whilst that kind of headline was very exciting, an 83 million, wow, that would be a great number for Alexander Isak. That would be a number that all Arsenal fans, I think, would pay. I don't think that is true. I think we're kind of being duped by the Spanish press and the pressure on Spanish press, I should say, to create headlines and create stories. And it looks like from more reputable sources such as The Athletic, this is not what they're hearing. And we can, unfortunately, because it would have been a nice story, but we need to close this story down and not get too excited about it. So let's quickly chat some of Arsenal's fixtures coming up. We have West Ham at 3 o'clock this Saturday. I am going to be doing a preview pod for that. So keep an eye out on your podcast stream or feed, I think it's called, for that. And then we have a very, very difficult game away at Nottingham Forest. Nottingham Forest third. They are 6 points behind us. They've had some odd results recently, a 5-0 defeat to Bournemouth and a 2-1 defeat to Fulham. Both teams, respectively, very, very good, actually, Fulham and Bournemouth, having cracking seasons. But this is a banana skin game for us, I think. We're looking at Liverpool at the moment. They have Villa coming up, Villa away. That is tomorrow night. And they have Manchester City on the weekend, also away from home. So look, we're looking at Liverpool thinking, you could slip up here. Arsenal's next 3 Premier League fixtures after the West Ham game are away at Nottingham Forest, away at Manchester United, and then home at Chelsea. Now, crazy thing I'm about to say, Nottingham Forest away is the hardest of all of those games, but also never underestimate an away game at Manchester United or a London derby versus Chelsea. Those games, no matter how the teams either way are playing, they often throw up strange moments. Red cards, penalties, things that you just don't expect to happen in that kind of game. So we need to be wary of them, and Manchester United will be desperate for a result. and we love to give teams their big day out, don't we? So that game, the next 3 Premier League games after the West Ham game feel like real banana skins. We have one kind of saving grace that actually we have a weekend off after the Nottingham Forest game. So we will play Forest and then have some time out. I believe it's an FA Cup weekend in that slot. And we will then come back in on the 4th or 5th of March, depending on the draw, for our first Champions League tie. Okay? So we'll come back in for the first round of 16 tie. And then we will play Manchester United on the 9th, play our second round of 16 tie, and then play Chelsea on the 16th. That is an incredibly difficult period. We'll go through Nottingham Forest, Manchester United, Chelsea, plus a Champions League tie against Juventus, AC Milan, PSV, or Feyenoord, I believe. And one of those teams will be thrown in there as a double header. It's going to be an incredibly intense period. And then we come out of that with a little international break, which will be really good. Hopefully we can keep some players back, rest them. I'm really hoping people like Gabriel are not going away, and we can keep Saliba and these players who are super important for us. We'll be able to rest Miles Lewis-Skelly and Ethan Nwaneri. I can't see them getting called up. So, look, really, really exciting if we can get through the next five or six games with 5 or 6 wins. But also, it does feel like we're in this kind of period where there are some tough games coming up, and with every game being a must-win until Liverpool drop enough points, we are in a very, very odd period. Just to touch on Liverpool, watch them against Wolves on the weekend. Incredibly frustrating for me because they are just not as good as I think some of their kind of results are making them look. They didn't have a shot on target in the second half against Wolves. It was quite incredible. And the frustrating thing for me is I don't even think Wolves played particularly well. Like the Cunha finish was fantastic. But I don't know if I could say, oh wow, Wolves raised their level. I think just both teams just didn't really show up, and Liverpool got the penalty that they needed, and then there was 2 good goals. Apart from that, 2 moments for both teams. Sorry, 1 moment for each team. So it's so frustrating to see that happen. That can't last forever, though. They are away at Villa. They are away at Man City. There is a chance this week that they drop some points. That would be absolutely what we need. The frustrating thing is they lose one game, which we obviously, if we win our game, we're 4 points behind Liverpool. 4 points is the amount of points we lost from red cards this year. In my opinion, incorrect red cards. I don't think you can say the Saliba one is incorrect. I think you can say the Rice and Trossard one, they absolutely are. So, super, super frustrating that actually, whilst it's looking like 7 points, there's one game in it, and it would then be the red cards. So, we have been up against it this year, and we are going to have to keep going up against it and keep fighting for it. Like I say, I'm going to do a preview pod for the West Ham game. That'll probably come out Friday after the press conference, so keep an eye out for that. And we'll be discussing how we're going to line up, whether it'll be Mikel Merino or Leandro Trossard through the middle, all of that good stuff. But that concludes this episode of the Arsenal Roundup. So, it's been a bit of a demystifying session today, demystifying the fine that we had, and of course, demystifying that story coming out of Spain about Alexander Isak and his price tag. Let's be very, very hopeful for the West Ham game. We beat them 5-2 in the previous game, and we are at home this Saturday, so hopefully all things point to an Arsenal win. If you've enjoyed this episode of Arsenal Unfiltered, or you've enjoyed any episode that you've listened to, please consider giving me a subscribe or leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts at. It really, really helps me grow the podcast and allows me to keep bringing you content 3 times a week. For now, all that's left to say is thank you for following, thank you for listening, and I'll speak to you very, very soon.